call is being recorded.
Coach Sharif, Salaam. Jeff
Coach
Callaway,
Callaway,
how are you?
I'm doing well, Coach Callaway. It's always good to hear from you.
You too. You can hear me okay? I can hear you clear.
Yes, sir.
So, Coach, I wanted to talk to you about what you're doing with the AATQ and let the golfing community know about you and your background as a sport psychologist.
Yeah, absolutely. So my background in psychology is both clinical and sport. In the clinical realm, I do early intervention work, and I'm currently working with UCSF Benioff's Children's Hospital SPARK program. My focus of that work as I use narrative play-based therapeutic, and my theoretical orientation within both is rooted in CBT, which is a cognitive behavioral therapeutic approach. Essentially, the cliche saying is train the mind and the body will follow. And that's really the root of sport psychology is we're going in there and we're trying to build awareness for the athlete around how he's thinking or she's thinking and the ways that their thoughts and their emotions are impacting their performance. If we can help support them in those areas of motivation, confidence, helping them to understand the things that can help build their competence, using tools such as controlled breathing, visualization, so on and so forth, then the hope is to help them cultivate a competitive advantage when they go in for competition and for practices.
Now, to train the mind and the body will follow, is that really a cliche, or what's the truth behind that? Train the mind.
Absolutely.
First of all, how do you train a mind?
Mm-hmm.
And let's say in golf, well, we'll say sport in general, but I like to be specific with golf. How do you train a mind for golf?
Mm-hmm.
Just a brief kind of analysis.
Certainly. So a model that I use is to really help understand the process it's called ARM, which is an acronym.
It's called what?
ARM, A-R-M. And
okay.
It's an acronym which stands for Awareness, Rehearsal, and Mastery. It's kind of built like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where you start from a base, which is your basic needs, and then you move up through to self-actualization, which would be equivalent to mastery in this case. So training of the mind first begins with awareness building. You want the athlete to be aware of the many dynamics that are impacting them mentally and emotionally. A lot of the times we enter these spaces and we enter it from a subjective space, right? So athletes will go into a space and they are subjected to various pressures that they hadn't considered before. And those pressures then impact their capacity to play. No matter how many times they practice shooting at the free throw line or doing that putt, maybe they have an external event that's happening that causes them to have a broad external focus instead of a narrow internal focus, and they end up missing that shot or that putt that they've practiced 1,000 times for. What we want to do is to help bring to their attention, these are the potential situations you would face, and let's start training your mind to help you build awareness around what tools, evidence-based research tools, we can provide you with that's going to help you rise to the occasion in those situations. So awareness building is the first part. But just because you know something doesn't mean that you're able to execute it. So the next part is the holding of the athlete through the application process, and that's rehearsal. How do you integrate now what you know into, how do you integrate what you know into applied work? Meaning, how do I take this and apply it? And from a sports psychology mental skills coach, what we do is we provide the exercises, we provide the reflections, and we apply the assessments that help the athlete integrate these practices into their play. And also with the assessment, provide feedback that helps them really assess their growth, right? And then lastly, the hope is that when that rehearsal, as they continue to grow and rehearse and practice, that ultimately it'll lead to their mastery of those skills.
So it's synergized together. One leads to the other: awareness, rehearsal, mastery.
Absolutely.
And we have the acronym ARM. Now, going back, I want to make it clear to those that are listening and trying to improve upon their game, because that's part of what this conversation is about, helping some of the new golfers and amateurs that are just learning the game or just want to improve. What's the difference between broad and narrow focus that you mentioned? What's the difference? What is broad? What is narrow?
Yeah, that's a great question. And when you're thinking about focus, what we use in our field is something. It's a theoretical formation that is based on Nidafer's attentional model and areas of focus. So the way you kind of look at it is you have two areas of focus. You have a broad and you have a narrow. And in the broad, you have an external focus and an internal focus. And in the narrow, you have an external and internal. So if I was to draw a cross, right, just to kind of give a visualization of what I'm about to explain, I would take in the cross, the top of the cross, I would write a B for broad. At the bottom on south, I would write an N. East, I would write an I. And west, I would write an E, right? Okay. So in the areas of broad, external, and internal focus, the difference would be a broad external focus is the athlete assessing the situation, right? Looking out, let's say, if it's a golfer, looking at the landscape, assessing the competition, just looking at the crowd and the audience, it's an assessment. Knowing when to do that and how to use that to help you is important. A broad internal is more of an analyzing of that. So they see these things and then they analyze, what does this mean to me and how might this impact me as an athlete in my play? If I move to the IN, which is the narrow, the NI, which is the narrow internal focus, this is the athlete. Now they've assessed, they've analyzed, they're preparing to compete and do whatever is required of them in the moment, right? So for baseball players, it may be a pitcher may be a pre-performance routine before they throw the pitch. A golfer, it may be their pre-performance routine before they putt. This is the preparation, the narrow internal, and then the narrow external is the actual action, the execution of that preparation. those are the 4 areas, NIDAFOR's 4 areas of focus, attentional styles of focus that we work, and we use various trainings to help the athlete identify in their sport how to use these in a way that's going to enhance their play.
So is this achieved by repetition, similar to doing any sport, to where you're doing it over and over and until it becomes supposedly second nature, or are there certain cues that you attach to it when you think about it, or when you go to actually practice a external look or internal thing?
Absolutely.
Is there cues, or is it done from repetition?
Yeah,
how does
that's
that
a great
work
question.
briefly?
Well, based on, if we're going back to the ARM model, right? So awareness and rehearsal, it's both of these. First, what we do is we just bring it to the athlete's awareness. These are the dynamics that are involved in your sport. This is what we know based on the research that we have about golfers, for example, and focus. So let's build your awareness around it. Then next, it is rehearsal. They're constantly working on this. They're saying, and for the novice golfer who's trying to become elite, they're going to have these situations. They need lived experience, and they need to practice applying and really focusing. So, before they might not have known, I'm in this moment here, and I need to have a narrow internal focus where I'm preparing and blocking out the crowd. How do I do that? So here's 2 examples of how we might approach that. One is always say, go to your breath. If you need more energy, do rapid breathing. If you need less energy, do maybe a 4-4-4 breath count. To reduce your arousal, not less energy, to reduce your aroused state. That might be one of the tools in the tool bag. The other one is, I notice this athlete tends to, when they should have a narrow internal focus, they have a broad external focus, and they're looking around when they should be doing their pre-performance routine at the crowd and everything else. Well, what they're thinking is important in that situation. This gets to the cognitive behavioral therapeutic approach. Train the mind and the body will follow. So what they're thinking about, we bring it to the awareness. When you're in this situation and you should have a narrow internal focus, what are your thoughts? First off, identify the situation. It's a 5-step process. What's the situation? So we very technically, we have them write this down, identify the situation, then we identify their thought patterns. Typically, with these athletes, you might find, for many of them, that they have negative thought patterns. Now we're in a tool that we use called self-talk. Well, let's go and say, let's explore that. If you have these negative thought patterns, what type of emotions are going to come as a result of the negative thought patterns? And if you have negative thought patterns and negative emotions, what type of behaviors, performance will you have as a result of holding that? And then what's your outcome going to be? I can guarantee you that with negative thoughts and negative emotions, the probability of you having a negative outcome is damn near 100%. So what we want to do is have you identify the situation, do some positive self-talk, flush away the negative, get to a positive emotional state, and then have behaviors that you've been practicing to execute and get the outcome you want. Now, although I can't guarantee that an athlete is going to have 100% success every time they have a positive thought and positive emotion, I can guarantee that they will pretty much have 100% failure with negative thoughts and negative emotions. And so what we really want to do with practice, again, awareness, rehearsal, mastery, with practice, the more they do it, the more they experience it, there is the capacity for them to show up in moving from a novice to an elite with mastery execution. There's a higher probability of that.
Now, in consideration of the mind leading the body, train the mind, and the body will follow, it sounds as though that you have to train the mind first. So what percentage of the mind rules over the swing? Because most of our beginners and a lot of our intermediate and advanced golfers are so into the swing that they forget about training the mind. So how are we doing this in golf? We're training the mind first, 70% of mind, 30% swing, 80% mind, 20% swing, 50-50. What's your opinion?
Well, a way that I begin exploring this question, because I actually pose this to a lot of the athletes, and I ask athletes, I say, you tell me, how much of your sport is mental and how much of your sport is physical? And you may get, 60-40 mental, or you might get, 80-20 mental, whatever it might be. But it's always, athletes will tell you, and coaches as well, that the game is mental, right? And and then I ask them, I say, so if you know that you have, let's say 60-40, 60% of your game is mental and 40% is the mechanics, how much time do you put preparing for your mental, and how much time do you put for preparing for your physical, the mechanics? And it's always pretty much a 90-10. I give 90% of my awareness and my building and my training to my mechanical training and about 10% to my mental. And that doesn't make any sense. It doesn't add up, right? And then no wonder they're facing these situations and they're having, particularly young athletes, novice, you have burnout, or you have an inability to focus, or you have a lower competence, lower confidence. Like all of these things are because they're not being proactive in the development of these skills. So it is a mental game. And even before they even learned their mechanics, it had to first be explained to them, shown to them, and they had to process that in their mind and then make that transition, to their game. I'll give you a little research around mental. So there's a study that was done that looked at 3 types of athletes, right? Oh, no, excuse me, 4. They had a group of athletes that they had just do mechanical work. Then they had a group of athletes that just did visualization work. Then they had a group of athletes that did both. And then they had a group of athletes that did nothing. So the ones that did the worst, obviously, were the athletes who did no visualization and no mechanical work, biomechanical work. The ones that did after that were the ones who did only visualization. The ones that performed a little better were the ones who did only mechanical work. But there was a minute difference in those performances between visualization, and just mechanics. Now, the ones who did significantly better than them all were the ones who did both visualization and worked on their mechanics. The visualization is a process of using your mind, closing your eyes, being able to see yourself and your performance, and contemplating and meditating on the things that are important in your mental game. And that's what the research tells us. So there is a relationship, a strong relationship between mental skill development and mechanic development when it comes to enhancing an athlete's performance.
Okay, now let's move over, and that's a lot, and that's really important, and we could go on for a while with that. Let's go to the work that you're doing with the African American Tour Quest program and working with the professionals. What is your approach toward them that are trying to really get to an elite level in sport, which is the PGA Tour, LPGA Tour? How do you approach them? What are you looking for from these professionals in terms of their weaknesses as well as their strengths? And how do you purge both aspects?
Right. Well, you know, this is a particular particular point of importance for me because and passion. I identify as an African American male. I understand the many dynamics that have been put in place and that exist within our culture and within our systems that can make it very challenging to advance, right? So sport is no different, you know, and it exists there. So when I think about those African-American male athletes who are competing, I think it's important first to identify for them, help them identify clearly what is their identity and how does that intersect with the sport that they're playing. And in this, we're talking about golf. Why is that important? Because if you are one of the only black males competing in a predominantly white male sport, and there are impacts there are dynamics that can potentially impact your capacity to perform. You know, there might be, for example, young black men who are walking into environments that can, you know, no matter how much they practice, that can give them a level of uncomfort, unease. You know, I'm holding in mind, obviously, we think about the struggles of Jackie Robinson and all our forefathers who came before us who've paved the way and opened these doors, but it doesn't mean they're fully open. There are still places today in our country where black folks can't even play on these courses. That means something, right? So we want to be able to help prepare those young athletes, these young men who are competing in golf, to meet that head on, right? And to be able to see what they're facing, identify it. One of the ways we do that is the acronym, it's ESPN, which was a catchy acronym, Everybody's Sports Psychology Narrative. And it's based on an addressing model by Dr. I think Pamela Davis, I want to say. Pamela Hayes, Dr. Hayes, where you have the individual identify all the aspects of their identity, and once they do that, think together about how does this intersect with the space I'm going into, the culture that I'm in, right, and the organizational structure that I'm participating in. In this situation, it's golf. Very important. If it's normed and you understand it, then it's not going to catch you off guard. The next thing is, you know, similar to any other athlete, is focusing on those skills that are needed to compete at an elite level, you know. And it's as simple as doing an assessment that can identify some key traits and the areas that they're strong in, the areas that they're weaker in, and then starting to work with them to build those areas of weakness so that they can become strengths. And altogether, the hope is that it will continue to help cultivate that competitive advantage for the athlete.
Now, in my book, Invisible Golfers, African American Tour Quest, which I'm going to re-release, and I'm doing the supplemental right now, in my analysis, I said that the psychological, sociological, and financial aspects are what's holds a lot of the black golfers back from making it onto the tour. I want to look at the sports psychology side of it. And one of the things that I said that it's very imperative that every player on Tour Quest should have a sport psychologist available to explore the depth of his subconscious mind as it relates to his self-confidence, approach to the game at a professional level, and, of course, a reality that determines if the player does have the necessary skills, focus, time, and resources to succeed. And what I mean by that is that, psychologically speaking, can you tell if a person or a player is being real, or if a person really can make it onto the tour based on your assessment of his skills and personality? Can you tell if this person is being real, or is this person being delusional that he really doesn't have a chance or a real outside chance and it's just a pipe dream? This is a reality factor that I discovered in my research. What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, I mean, from a mental skills approach, the beauty about that is that, the brain is very elastic. There's growth. It can grow. So assessing them and seeing the skills and identifying, we can point to very clearly, these are the areas that you need to improve on. But, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink, right? And so there may be times where, you give the athlete the work and they're just not motivated to do it. And for whatever reason, and they're not following through and doing the work, does that mean that they won't grow? They're going to grow relative to what they put in. And, there are, I think, in an informal assessment, you start to see athletes that share this sort of hunger and this fire in them, that quality, that unteachable quality that, they really, this is what they want to do, and they're willing to give everything they have to get there. And and while the others may grow, it's this particular intrinsic motivation, I should say, the intrinsic motivation that is a great indicator of the capacity for that athlete to compete very well. Now, the reality is in basketball, if you're not 6'6" and can't, dribble and shoot and play defense, as a 5'4", your chances are pretty much you're not going to make it, right, to play at an elite level because you just don't have what it takes. When it comes to mechanics, there are some things that will close the door for you in sports. But when we think about mental skill development, everyone has a capacity to grow in those areas. Everyone does. It just depends on how much they apply the work. And that's the beauty of mental skills. This is what I tell parents, I say, look, you're investing all this money into your child to compete in an industry, maybe get into college where, less than 5% may compete on a collegiate level, and they compete professionally less than 1%. So what is the ROI on your investment? What is the return on your investment? If they invest in mental skill development, at the end of the day, whether they make it professionally or play collegiately, they're going to take the takeaways they have are going to serve them in an educational developmental capacity for the rest of their lives, right? And that's what I tell people also is the beauty of the game. I say, look, it's okay. You want to respect the business and entertainment dynamics of sport and be outcome-oriented and say, I want the trophy. I want the win. I get it. But the higher purpose is much more. Those athletes who are privileged enough to compete on a professional level in sport there's something bigger than that, right? Jackie Robinson's tombstone says, a life is only important in the impact that it has. A life is not important except in the impact that it has on another person's life. That's the last words he wanted to leave, right? And that's what sport is. We as athletes, they're privileged enough to face situations time and time again. And the question they ask themselves is, what is this going to teach me about myself? That's the privilege they have. What is this going to show me about who I am and how hard I've been working to be the best that I can be? That's what the moment is. You know, Muhammad Ali said.
Go ahead.
Muhammad Ali said, look, I'm not worried about losing because I'm a champion even when I lose. Right? He understood that failure is a part of his mastery. Right? He understood that every time people make mistakes, but fools practice them. He said, I'll take the L, but I'm coming back. I'm going to learn from them. I'm going to make the adjustment. I'm going to keep going. Right? This is all part of the mental preparation for the game.
And our final question, that is dynamic and very intense, in-depth information. And I hope our listeners really can grasp something. I think the listeners can grasp something out of there that can really help them and move them forward in their game. What is our final question, and briefly, what is your goal that you would like to see accomplished with the AATQ as far as working with the professionals to help them get on the PGA Tour and succeed? What are your goals, your personal goals?
I have two goals. One is I want to see these athletes compete and show up in a way that's transformative and impactful to the sport from an organizational, structural level and in a culturally and shift and impact the dynamics of the game, period. I want to see them go out organizational, structurally, win. Go out there, win, show up. And in this, also represent who they are, to represent the beauty and the diversity of African American life and culture, and to elevate and shift the culture of the game. That's what I would love to see at the end of the day.
That's beautifully said, and that's as the director of player development for AATQ. That's the same exact goals that I have, actually. I want to see the players go out and make an impact and really strike big and be up on that leaderboard week after week and go into a new dimension of consistency in golf. Anyway, that's for a whole different subject and conversation. You can tell us right now your information, and then I will put it on the board. And we're going to have a part 2 of our conversation online and offline.
Absolutely.
So tell the listeners, give the listeners your information.
Yeah, so the company, the sports psychology consultation group is youthonwardandupward.com is where I can be reached, youthonwardandupward.com, YOU Sports. And you can reach out, and if you're interested, we offer one-on-one teleconsulting online to all athletes. We work primarily with ages 14 through 21, but we have the capacity to serve more. And we also, a great additive to that is that we take a holistic approach. So we're not looking at athletes. A lot of people have this understanding that you have a sports psychologist, what's the problem? We're an early intervention approach. We're saying, let's get you in here before there is a problem, right? So those individuals who are interested in their athletes learning how to identify the things that before they become a problem, this is the place for them. We take a holistic approach in that we work with their coaches and we work with their parents, gathering collateral information and providing information on how to more effectively work with that athletic style or that athletic type of their athlete. We also offer workshops for parents and coaches and athletes, and really to help familiarize them with, it's an awareness building workshop with the work that we do, and give a couple tools here and there to kind of help get them started. So once again, it's youthonwardandupward.com. That's the touchstone place where if they'd like more information, reach out, send an email, and the team will be happy to get more info to you.
Okay, and I'll put up a board with your information on that.
Oh, thank you, Coach.
And Coach Salaam, thank you. And let's do it again. And I'll be in touch with you anyway, like I said, offline. Thank you very much for your time. I'll talk to you later.
I'll talk to you later. Appreciate you, Coach. You're doing amazing work out here.
Thank you. Peace.
Peace.